I just want to say hi because we're going to get started right on time tonight. First of all, I would like to say welcome back and to all of you, and thank you for being here, and thank you for being here early. We're starting early because Brad, Hoylman, Sigal, and Micah, Lasher are our featured speakers. They both still have children at home. Brad is going to go first, and then needs to leave, and so he wanted to give us the maximum amount of time. So that's why I'm starting us off just a couple minutes early. I just want to say a couple things. First of all board members either stand up or raise your hands so that you can see who does all the, please look around the room and see all the people who make the club go. I'm Danielle Gerard, I'm the president, and I'm really glad to see this many people here this early. It's really great. The other thing is we have a lot of exciting stuff coming up. I hope that you all check your emails regularly, mostly because we have a women's march coming up on September 20th. That's this Saturday. We have a No Kings March coming up on October 18th. That's also a Saturday. We are going to be arranging for people to meet at a central location so that we can travel together down to these places, or you can find us down there. We don't have all the details yet, and when we do, we'll be sure to share them with you. In addition, we have street fairs coming up, and we are going to be tabling at those street fairs. As you all know, Zoran Mamdani is the Democratic candidate for mayor. We are hoping... Thank you, that's wonderful. We are hoping to see many of you out at our tables helping out to spread the word and get him elected by a resounding margin, not the least of which because he is young and vigorous and has caused a tremendous turnout of new voters, but also because the very last thing we need in these troubling times is for Andrew Cuomo or Eric Adams to be mayor. In addition, for those of you who haven't been paying as much attention as the rest of us junkies, as you know, Brad Lander endorsed Mamdani, and Ruth Messenger has come out, and a lot of different people are meeting with him. People that we know, love, and respect are meeting with him to help him be somewhat more measured in some of his outspokenness. Not because he's not right, but because things need to be framed better. And also because we really, my personal concern is that what we really need is for him to hire really excellent managers as deputy mayor, as heads of the agencies. We've had, I'm sorry for saying this, but we have had 12 years of almost no governance, and if we don't get some soon, it's going to be very difficult. And again, it's because of these troubling times. So I just had a discussion with some of the members regarding what ICE is up to and what the Supreme Court is allowing. And we really need to be able to fight back. We need to be Pritzker on steroids regarding all the ICE involvement. So that's pretty much it for now. We're going to have district leader reports later on from Teresa and Dan. I will announce repeatedly that we're going to be sending out information regarding the various marches coming up. We always like to come out in force for these with our signs. Here come two more board members. Please wave, board members, Miriam and Doug, because I introduced all the board members earlier, not by name, but I just called a lot of attention to you. Brad should be here shortly. I am hoping to remember other things that I've forgotten that I wanted to share. Hope you all had a wonderful summer. Hope that a lot of you enjoyed the picnic. Who went to the picnic? Let's hear it for Teresa, who's standing at the back of the room who always gets the permits, always arranges everything perfectly, set up by Barbara Footer and a whole bunch of other people. But the best thing that Teresa is able to do every year is arrange perfect weather. So that's what really helps. I think we had over 125 people this year. I'm not even sure. So let's give it up again for Teresa. For those of you who weren't here earlier, I just want to say that the sound team, Chuck is still upstairs guiding people to come downstairs, and so is Sumeda or another board member. But we gave it up for the sound team for their pivot from the ballroom to come down here. Not very obvious, but this is not the ideal room, although back in the day, we often had to come down here when there were renovations upstairs. Here comes another board member, Ellen Flax, our treasurer, who is very careful with membership fees, with fundraising funds that come in, and otherwise keeps us going on a tight leash. Let's see, who else can I tell you about? That's about it for now. I'm going to stop until Brad comes in, and then Micah should come in shortly after him. I do want to say that in both of them, and I should probably say this again when they get here, in both of them we have really stellar legislators, people who really care, who really understand about writing legislation. And that's one of the reasons that Brad is going to be such a great borough president, as he gets everything from both angles. And for those of you who are wondering about Jerry Nadler's successor, we, of course, are hoping that when it comes time for endorsements, that this club will support Micah Lasher, who has been a true friend for many years. And in addition, in addition, we are going to be super lucky for our October meeting, which is on October 8th. If I have that date right, we're going to have Alvin Bragg, and on November 12th, we're going to have Jerry Nadler. So we certainly hope you all are able to come then. For those of you sitting on the aisles, if you don't mind moving in just a little bit so Shoshana doesn't have to rush around and get more chairs when more people show up. So scoot in one chair if you want to. You can get very close to Mimi here, sir. She's very nice. She doesn't bite. Okay, I'm talking too much, so I'm going to step away for a moment. Our next borough president. And you didn't hear me say that you were a stellar legislator, and that was going to help make you a terrific borough president. Brad Hoylman Sigal.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Wow, thank you. This is a new space. I like it. Different, not upstairs. You don't like it? Okay. We'll leave it at that. State Senator Brad Hoylman Sigal. First of all, thank you. Thank you 30,000 times over, because as Nicole, who many of you met during the campaign, let's give it up for Nicole for helping run an amazing race. Upper West Sider, 30,000 votes is our margin of victory. So I appreciate that so much, and has no small part due to 3 Parks and all the petitioning and the canvassing and 96th Street. So they should erect a statue to you, Danielle, and a few others. But I'm here to say a few words, talk about the election, talk about the specter of federal troops on our streets, talk about the political violence. Oh, my gosh, I know we all saw the news this afternoon, which is devastating no matter where you are on the political spectrum. Because, I mean, as an elected official, as a public official, which some of us are here, it really hits home because, you think about retaliation, you think about what makes someone go to those extremes besides pure insanity, and you think about the tone and the tenor of public discourse and the coarseness of it. The president or the vice president, they have no compunction about using the F word or worse, in front of young people, children on social media. It's just everything has been debased to a point that I think I guess, could have predicted this, but we have to figure out how we can elevate it. And certainly, we're going to be missing someone incredibly important in Washington who always held himself with such grace under pressure, and that's Congressman Jerry Nadler. We're not going to replace Jerry Nadler. Someone's going to succeed Jerry Nadler because he is truly irreplaceable. And for my family, particularly on LGBTQ rights, whether it's marriage equality or surrogacy or protections in the workplace, his leadership meant so much to me as a young kid growing up, in West Virginia. I knew who Jerry Nadler was, and what an honor to serve alongside him on the West Side. And let me just say one more thing about Jerry, then we'll turn to some of the other issues of the day. He had this amazing skill set of being able to keep the West Side together as a coalition. And we would look to Jerry. He would convene meetings. His team, Rob Gottheim, Amy Rutkin, and the whole crew, were like real thought leaders for our policies on the West Side, ranging from, high level, let's face it, the Iran nuclear vote was a tough one, and he took it. And then down to the most, pedestrian, literally, street crosswalks and land use actions. Jerry was involved and remains involved every step of the way. But, finding a successor to Jerry is going to be a challenge for this club, but we are lucky in that we have an amazing candidate who's already announced. Not that I'm announcing my endorsement tonight, but I got to say, if there's anyone who is well-positioned to take the mantle and lead it forward for the west side of Manhattan and the entire 12th District, it's Micah Lasher. But that's for you guys to discuss later. I'm just happy that Micah gets 9 months of standing at the 96th Street subway station. He's used to it. But let me just say a few things. I know you have a packed schedule tonight, but I have a few bills, kind of cleanup bills in Albany before I leave. One I've spoken to you about before, medical aid in dying. And as I think many of you know, it would allow individuals who've been given a diagnosis of 6 months or fewer to live the opportunity to end their life with dignity. 11 states already have it, as well as the District of Columbia. You can go to New Jersey and seek it, or Vermont. New Yorkers should have the right to have it here in the convenience of their homes and with their family members and their hospice care. So we're going to fight for that. The governor has sent some mixed signals, some positive, some not so positive, through some of her channels. But if anyone is interested in writing her, if there's a resolution from the club over the next few months on medical aid in dying, if you have a consensus, that would be really helpful, because Governor Hochul, she's going to need the West Side when she runs for re-election and has a primary challenge. And so I think West Siders need to let her know that we care about medical aid in dying and we want her to sign the bill. So be in touch with me, or you can even go to a website, Compassion and Choices. They have a whole toolkit on how you can contact the governor. I'd really appreciate it, and so with so many other people who've been fighting for this for years. Another bill that we want the governor to sign is a bill that would strengthen our SHIELD laws for both reproductive health care and for gender-affirming care. The bill does basically this. If you are from out of state and you're seeking either gender-affirming care or reproductive health care in the state of New York, let's say you're from Utah or Kansas, red states where basically abortion and gender-affirming care have been made illegal. If you come to New York, there's concern that out-of-state prosecutors could go after not just you, not just your child, but your physicians, your health care workers, your social workers, your psychiatrists, even those based in New York. And so this law creates a shield and prevents us from cooperating with those red states if they seek to curtail your rights to that health care in the state of New York. So we want her to sign that. Senator Liz Krueger, this was my bill, but Senator Liz Krueger is organizing a letter to the governor on a number of bills involving reproductive health care and gender-affirming care. So the pressure's on. We think the governor's in the right place. She just needs to sign it. We hope she signs it sooner rather than later because it's literally having an impact now. As we know, some hospitals, including NYU Langone, have refused to make new appointments for people seeking gender-affirming care. So, and there's a lot of confusion. Third issue that I've been working with Assemblywoman Rosenthal on is about rent algorithms. And a number of municipalities and maybe a state or two have passed a similar law, which Linda and I passed, which would prevent real estate companies, landlords, from collusion in setting rents for Manhattan or other boroughs. Right now, they're using software that has predictive algorithm that sets the desired rent, basically the highest rent they think, based on a number of factors that they put into this AI device that, in effect, means collusion. You know, if a few landlords got together in the corner of a room and said, we're gonna set the rent on the Upper West Side at $4,500 for a one bedroom, and let's all stick to it so we don't undercut each other, that would be illegal. That's price fixing. Well, this is basically price fixing through AI and through this algorithm. So we want to ban that, and I hope the governor signs it. Fourth bill, which is an important one, is a bill that builds off of Danny O'Donnell's work in the Assembly. He passed, over a decade ago, a bill called Dignity for All Students Act, DASA, it's called, the shorthand. And what it does, requires schools and school boards to provide instructional materials and training for teachers and principals and staff and administrators to be alert to instances of hate and bias. It's basically to protect kids from abuse, social abuse in the classroom and elsewhere. It's been very effective. This kind of training has gone a long way to identify cases of hate directed at students before it gets too late, whether there's any harm, hopefully, that might come from it. So our bill does the same thing Danny's bill does, but Danny's bill only applied to public schools. Our bill applies to independent private schools. So we want to take DASA one step further. It's named after a young man who's from Manhattan named Jack Reed, who was bullied and harassed in his private school until he took his own life. And this was 2 years ago. And his parents did something remarkable, which is, they said this shouldn't happen in New York in the 21st century. So they took themselves to Albany, and we were introduced, and we wrote a bill, and we got it passed through both houses. It's remarkable. And they did a remarkable job and deserve a tremendous amount of credit. And so we want the governor to sign it. And then finally, another bill would eliminate prior authorization for a number of HIV medications. Rather than having to go through the hoops of prior authorization, if you're HIV positive, particularly if you're on Medicaid, you should be able to get that life-saving medicine without delay, and that's what our bill would do. So those are my top 5 bills that I want the governor to sign. I have 60 more, but these are my top 5. These are my top 5. So it's been a great session, and I'll close with this on the issue of troops, and I know that's sending federal troops to New York, which is a really frightening thought for all of us, because it turns our democracy into autocracy. It is truly the verge of the totalitarian state that we all fear. And here's what's happening, as far as I can tell. There's very little we have power over at the state level over the feds. We're preempted. But the courts, in the main, have been ruling in states' favors, in the main, in the favor of states. So there's a case that's been brought by California and the District of Columbia and the Ninth Circuit in California to argue against Trump's executive actions on federalizing the National Guard and moving troops into cities like Los Angeles. New York State has just signed on to an amicus brief. The governor has been very outspoken in opposition. Our own local police commissioner has been very outspoken in her opposition. We're looking at legislation and what we can do in terms of potential civil remedies, and Assemblymember Lasher can talk about that in terms of federal action. But as it stands now, we're relying on the Ninth Circuit to protect New York and other states that face this huge challenge. I hope, at the end of the day, we shut the government down. I mean, that's what I think is necessary. I hope our leaders in Congress understand that. I think they're getting the picture that drastic measures are required to bring this insanity to a halt. So I think that's the most powerful thing we can do, is make our voices heard in that regard. But I'm going to hand it over back to Danielle. But thank you very much again. Really look forward to launching the Borough President office. I am open to ideas for both policy and personnel. We're having an event on October 14th. I think some of you got the invitation. Thank you for sending it out. And we're going to have, hopefully, at the beginning of the year, I'm going to be getting a listening tour with community boards, and I'm going to be looking to local leaders like yourselves for those very important community board appointments, which start as early as February. So that's going to be my job in the early part of the year, and I hope I can count on you to help me do it as successfully as I can. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to have a little Q&A.
Very quick.
We're going to go over to Mervyn first. Chuck, behind you, right next to Dan Cohen.
There was a piece in the paper about the Supreme Court that said that they can arrest anybody if they look green, yellow, purple, or chartreuse. The Supreme Court said it. They said that they can't differentiate, and they can do it. They can do it. How do we stop them?
Well, I mean,
That's what they said. That's what the court said.
yeah, it's and remember our own issue around stop and frisk in New York, which was invalidated at the federal court level, a lower court. But yeah, it's very concerning. That's an issue that we're going to have to confront even here at our own local policing level. How do we stop it? We have to get we have to win seats in the House and the Senate, and it comes down to that because we know we have a Supreme Court that is blinded by the MAGA Republicans. And all we can do is continue to fight. These midterms are going to be the most important, and certainly my generation. And so that's what we have to do. That's why local organizing is going to be so important.
And that's what we're really good at. Mary, and then Chuck. Mary, right here.
Thank you. Okay, Brad, I agree with you. We should shut down the government. Have you been able to communicate this and get response from Senator Schumer, who has the power to do this?
He's calling around asking local elected officials what they think. And I think you should even communicate with Senator Schumer as collectively or individually. He wants to know what the sense of the district is. What's that? He cannot figure that out. I think he wants. I think he understands. Yeah. Well, yeah.
My question is about the New York for All Act and where it is, and how will things be different once it's passed, and the urgency to get it passed, especially the relationship between local, state law enforcement and the federal government.
Well, we wanted to go back for a special session and pass New York for All. We think it's that important, and there's been a number of calls for that to happen. As we get closer to January, that seems less likely. That said, I hope it's a bill we take up in the first part of the year. I mean, it's got, I know in the Senate it has over 32 co-sponsors. So if it could pass, there's a price tag to it, which is daunting, and some other components that people think could be challenged from a constitutional standpoint. But I don't think we should sit around and dither over whether a local piece of legislation is going to pass federal muster or not. We probably can suspect that if it makes it to the Supreme Court and challenges Donald Trump, it won't. So let's just go to hell and pass everything we can. That's what I think.
Sounds good. Anybody else for Brad, or we can let him go home to his children?
Well, I'm actually going to, I wish I were going home to my children, but I'm receiving an award tonight from the Stonewall Community Foundation, so I'm very honored. Thank you. And they said if I'm not there in 15 minutes, they're not going to give it to me, so I better go. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Brad. Before we bring Micah up, I just want to commend all of the questioners so far tonight for asking questions concisely, briefly, succinctly. It's terrific. But then he'd have to wave like this. Okay, so I'm going to jump the gun a little bit. I'm going to introduce our current Assembly member, Micah Lasher, and with the membership's support, our successor to Jerry Nadler.
Thank you, Danielle and Dan, and it is family here at Three Parks, and it is absolutely wonderful to be here. Despite everything that is going on in our neighborhood at the congressional level, and I will hopefully have an announcement to make in the days ahead. Some of the people in this room may be seen in that announcement, and I'm grateful to those of you who have already been so generous with your encouragement, and I hope that I will be probably asking all of you for help in the months ahead. But I wanted to spend my time tonight really focused on and continuing the conversation that Senator Hoylman Sigal was having about what we can do at the state level to protect our laws and liberties and values. And this has been, this has been my focus in the Assembly. I've spoken, I think the last time I was with you in the spring, I gave an update about the range of bills that I was working on, many of them with Senator Hoylman Sigal. He and I have kind of been a bit of a buddy act on these issues. But I will just start by saying, I want to pick up where he left off, which is we are in an existential fight over the survival of our country as we know it. And the sooner that everybody understands that, the better a chance we have of prevailing. And that's just the bottom line. And that puts us in some uncomfortable positions because this is not the kind of, I still believe, if it were up to the Democratic Party, we would be having civil debate within democratic norms about what direction to take the country in. But the reality is the ship has sailed on that for now. And we are up against folks who will sacrifice our democracy in pursuit of their reactionary regime. That's where we're at. And so that forces us to some extent, play on that playing field. And we have to think about that in the short term, and we have to think about it in the long term. And Merv asked about the Supreme Court. I think, this is not, again, not the subject of my talk tonight, but I do think we have to ask ourselves the question of if we can hold ground in the near term and encounter again, as I hope we will, a moment where we actually have real power in Washington, not just control of the House, which I am hopeful we will get in 26, but a moment where where the pendulum swings back. What are the structural changes we are going to make to the way our democracy is organized to prevent this from happening again? And that is about making sure places like Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico have representation in the United States Senate. And I think it is probably about staggered term limits for the Supreme Court. And we need to have an expansive program because the reality is the Republican Party has been on a 50-year project to change the slant of the playing field. And I'm going to talk about redistricting because redistricting, so I have introduced the constitutional amendment in New York State to enable the state to do a mid-decade redistricting in response to Texas. And redistricting is a classic example. A lot of us wanted independent redistricting, fair drawing of lines, because we had seen for so long, particularly the Republicans in the state Senate, using that power to disenfranchise Democrats. And in spite of that, the Democratic Party won back the state Senate, and we're gonna have control of the legislature for the rest of the lifetime of everybody in this room. And what we didn't appreciate at the time and couldn't foresee was the extent to which redistricting is not a state political issue, it's a national political issue. And the question is not really, or at least primarily, do you have fair and competitive elections for congressional seats in your state, but do you have fair and competitive elections for the control of Congress in the United States of America? And if we hold ourselves to a standard that Republican states across the country have tossed in the garbage, we will never again have competitive elections for the House of Representatives, for control of the House of Representatives. we will have a Russian parliament. And that, I think, is more of a clear and direct end, threatened end, to a core bedrock piece of our democracy than anything we have seen. And so I talk to people who say, well, gosh, why do we have to resort to their level? And I certainly wish we do not. But that's the stakes. That is the stakes. They have elections in Russia. They do have elections. It's just the winner is foreordained. And that's what we are going to have if we do not get in the game on redistricting. So just to dive into the details for a second. As you all know, Donald Trump called up his friends in Texas, just like he called up Georgia some years ago, said, in Georgia, he said, find me some votes. In Texas, he said, find me some congressional seats. And they redrew the congressional lines to generate 5 additional seats in the state of Texas for the Republicans, okay? This was a Biden 46% state, I believe, and I think you're going to end up with Democrats holding 18% of the congressional seats. So the bill that I introduced, together with Mike Gianaris, who's the deputy leader of the Senate and their point person on redistricting, would allow New York, and again, we tried to balance our values, would allow New York to do a mid-decade redistricting in the circumstance in which another state has done so first, a circumstance that has been met. I will tell, and I should say, without going through an independent redistricting commission, but subject to the limitations in the state constitution pertaining to fair configuration of districts. And I will tell you honestly, we are having a serious conversation about whether to push the bill further and whether to move away from those requirements and perhaps whether to jettison the entire independent redistricting structure, which our bill does not currently do. And my view is that we should pass the most aggressive version of this that we believe can pass at the voting booths. Right? The process for a state constitutional amendment is it has to pass through the legislature twice. It has to do so on either side of an election for the legislature, which screws us on timing, by the way, unfortunately. This will not be in effect for the 26 elections, but this is a problem that is going to be with us for years and years and election cycles to come. I say to people, the Republicans make plans in decades and lifetimes, and we need to start doing the same. So I believe we will take this up in the fall. I believe we will amend the state constitution to do at a minimum what the bill that I've presently introduced will do, but we may go much further, and I think we have to if we want to hold on to our democracy. So, that's probably been the thing that has been consumed the most attention over the last couple of months, but I'll just share a couple of others with you. Together with Senator Hoylman Sigal, actually back in the spring, Senator Hoylman Sigal and I introduced legislation to sever the state public health law on vaccines from reliance on the Centers for Disease Control. Because we saw this coming. We saw it coming. But it was one of a bunch of things we're doing, and it was I sort of did the bill drafting, and I looked at the public health law, and there was really only one connection between the public health law, state public health law, and the CDC, and it related to meningococcal disease, and so the bill struck that reliance on CDC recommendations. What escaped me, which was in the news 2 weeks ago, was that there is a whole section of the education law, which is what governs pharmacists, that creates dependency for all vaccine schedules on the Centers for Disease Control. So we immediately, upon word of the news breaking, amended our legislation to amend the education law as well. And what our bill would do is give authority to the State Commissioner of Health to serve as an alternative source of authority on vaccine schedules. And our bill would allow, it's an alternative source of authority. So if we return to a day when the CDC again becomes interested in looking out for the public health interests of Americans and New Yorkers, then the State Commissioner of Health can say, I no longer need to serve in this role. But for the time being, it is eminently clear that we've got a lunatic and an anti-vax, anti-science, really destructive individual in charge of the entire public health apparatus of the federal government, and it's extremely disturbing. And we need this authority to rest with the state. And so that's what our bill would do. And I have been in touch with the governor's office, and I know that they are looking at it. There are insurance law implications as well. Assemblymember Rosenthal put in a bill on that. But I am confident that we will take this issue up early in the next legislative session, whether it's the bill that Brad and I have introduced or in the budget. And we also called on the State Commissioner of Health and the governor to use their executive authority to deal with this issue in the immediate, which they did either late last week or early this week. But they have to do that on a 30-day rolling basis, and it requires a declaration of disaster emergency, which is well enough for the next several months, but we need to deal with this issue on a structural basis. That's what our bill would do. During the legislative session, I introduced about a dozen bills that in different ways aimed to use state authority to protect New York from the fascist Trump regime. And I've spoken about this here before, sort of thinking about them in several categories: the expansion of state authority, the protection of New Yorkers' rights, like New York for All is an example of that, and then sort of what I term jujitsu bills, which in different ways attempt to kind of turn what Trump is doing back at him, like my bill to withhold state funds from Washington when they don't give us money that we're owed. What I found during the legislative session was that, first of all, I should just say, I'm incredibly disappointed in the legislature, of which I am a member. I'm not absolving myself of responsibility, but I am really disappointed that we did not do more in every single category. And I'm extremely frustrated that we did not, in an organized, coordinated way, pass a package of these bills. And I'm hopeful that that will change next session. But what I found got the most traction, and so I focused on them, were the bills to expand state authority where the feds were stepping back or dropping the ball or deliberately shutting things down. And I passed two important pieces of legislation in this regard. The first, which was one of the first bills I introduced, would take the federal disparate impact standard that is the linchpin of the Fair Housing Act of 1968 and put it into New York state law. Donald Trump, in 1973, Donald Trump was one of the very first, of the Trump Organization, one of the very first targets of a Justice Department case against the real estate industry for housing discrimination, 5 years after the passage of the Fair Housing Act of 1968. And so it was no surprise in the first Trump administration that he targeted the disparate impact standard from the jump and sought to repeal it administratively, was stopped in the final months of that first term by the federal courts in Massachusetts. But it is very clear that the Supreme Court, which last affirmed the disparate impact standard when Justice Kennedy was on the court and wrote the decision, will not uphold it if it makes it to the Supreme Court again. And state law has relied on the federal standard and the federal jurisprudence. So my bill with Senator Kavanaugh, the housing chair in the Senate, would bring the disparate impact standard into state law. It was, unsurprisingly, vigorously debated on the floor of the Assembly by the Republicans. It passed. It is now headed to the governor's desk, and I'm hopeful that she will sign it. The tougher one was a bill. A decade ago, I was chief of staff in the state attorney general's office. And at that time, I remember speaking to my colleagues and saying, what is the single most significant thing the legislature could do to make our office more effective? And the answer was to strengthen New York state law on corporate misconduct and consumer protection, which is one of the weakest in America, despite the fact that we are a very blue state. And at that time, we drafted a bill aiming at doing that. This is back in 2013, 2014. That bill has taken various forms and has languished in the legislature for a decade. Enter Donald Trump, comes in, he shuts down the FTC, and he shuts down the CFPB. And if you go to Public Citizen's website, they have a tracker of all of the matters and cases that this government has dropped against, in many cases, large financial institutions for taking advantage of Americans. And one of the first things I did when I entered the Assembly was because the person who had been sponsoring the bill in the Assembly had just retired, and I lobbied the Speaker to get the bill. I worked with the Attorney General to strengthen that bill, and I spent the entire session fighting to pass it. There were 55 entities, mostly corporations in the financial services industry, who lobbied against that bill. It was the second most lobbied bill of the session. Particularly the insurance industry and the banking industry opposed to this bill. I thought it was dead about 8 different times. We made some very painful concessions. I will acknowledge it is not as strong a bill as I had hoped. But literally at 10:30 p.m., the last night of the state Senate session, the state Senate was going out before the Assembly was, so if we didn't get it passed before the Senate left, we were screwed. And basically, because it was so controversial, what had happened was there was an agreement that more or less got made between the Speaker of the Assembly, the Majority Leader of the Senate, and the Governor, that unless all 3 of them were comfortable passing it, not with no guarantee the Governor would sign it, but unless all 3 of them were comfortable passing it through the legislature, nobody was going to move it. And I thought it was dead. But we kept on fighting, and at 10:30 that last night of the Senate session, we had a breakthrough. We literally had 5 minutes. The Majority Leader at one point said, I need assurance from everybody in the next 5 minutes, or we're passed. We got that assurance. I was the only, the Assembly was done for the night. I was sitting in a room with some people vacuuming the Assembly chamber. Senator's down the hall. I'm like, I think we got this. I walk over to the Senate. They've published their last agenda for the night. Bill's not on it. They've taken out their ice cream. They have an end of session, literally, end of session ice cream celebration. And this had been a very controversial topic. So people have been kind of knew this was, and I see Senator Hoylman Sigal. I said, you heard anything about my bill? He said, Micah. I said, it's not, you lost, basically. It's like, it's not happening. I said, I don't know. I think maybe. All the lobbyists, by the way, had gone home. They thought they won. 12:30 a.m., the Senate publishes a 1-bill supplemental agenda. The Senate sponsor, Leroy Comrie, the debate started at about 2 o'clock in the morning. He debated it. The Republicans in the Senate, I'm sitting in the Senate chamber. Everybody, the Republicans are looking at me like, what has happened here? They used the maximum debate time. I think the bill passed around 3:30 in the morning. I walked in the Capitol next morning. I see a young associate at one of the big lobbying firms said, man, people are angry at you this morning. And we passed in the Assembly on the last night of the session. I'm incredibly proud of that bill. It is headed to the governor's desk. I am not confident that that bill will be signed by the governor, but I'm working very closely with the Attorney General's office to try and assure that it will be. And it is, I think, a bill that will make an enormous difference, both in making up for what is not happening in Washington, but just protecting New Yorkers for a very long time to come from really powerful forces that stand in opposition to their interests. So I'm just very proud of that, and hopefully we'll get it signed. So that is a little bit of some of the highlights of the legislative session. It's been a light year, and I'd welcome any questions at all. Yeah.
While Miriam is waiting for the mic, I just want to say that both Micah and Brad missed my introductory remarks about what stellar legislators they are, and that was going to help Brad be a terrific borough president, and it will help you continue to be a great legislator. So I just wanted to get that in.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Miriam.
So thank you very much for your work. Because of your important role with the Attorney General's office, I would like your thoughts on how we could support Tish James, who's been great and is part of Trump's campaign of retribution.
I think so much of what is happening right now is about distorting our sense of reality. You know, Trump is doing to Tish James exactly what he's doing to Fed Governor Cook, right? Literally, it's the same thing. Not a coincidence. They're both black women, by the way, right? And I think that it is incredibly important for all of us to use our voices in whatever capacity we have, whether that is social media, whether that is out in the streets, whether that is in, I think it is important to call out what is happening here, which is that they are weaponizing government to trump up, no pun intended, false charges against those that stand up to them. That is institutions. That's institutions, that is individuals, that is government leaders, and they are trying to pass it off as the normal functioning of government when it is McCarthyism. And I think it is really important to call that out for what it is. Tish James is a badass, and I have no doubt that she is going to prevail and be undeterred by this. But I think, by the way, I 100% agree with Brad on, Congress should shut this, that Democrats in Congress should shut this down, okay? And what that is about, as much as anything, is moral clarity, which is we may not be able to win every skirmish or every strategic battle, but what we can do is speak with moral clarity. And I think that is incredibly important, particularly when it comes to the weaponization of law enforcement to target people who are doing the job they were duly elected to do and speak truth to power.
Again, thank you for keeping your questions as questions. Sir in the white shirt in the front, and then Alex, and then we'll come over here to you guys.
My question has to do with... I need the mic. Micah, it's good to see you.
Good to see you.
I am very concerned about what our next steps are, since we're already seeing behind us the controversy in LA, the controversy in DC, and what's going to happen in Chicago. We're next on the hit list. So what we need is some, I think, suggestions, guidance as to what we need to do
because going up to Schumer's office served no purpose. I've done that a few times. He won't even meet with us. So our elected officials, it's falling on the shoulders of the citizenry.
We're talking about the deployment of armed federal agents into our
Correct.
city.
Nobody seems to remember Kent State.
Yeah. Look, I think Senator Hoylman Sigal talked a little bit about the battles in the courts that are being waged over this. I think at the end of the day, a lot of this is going to be about how our executives, our governor and our mayor, deploy their authority. And I think there is a reality also, I think it's probably more true at the state level than it is at the city level, of some significant ideological sympathy in the law enforcement community across federal and state lines. And so I think a lot is going to be up to the governor and whoever our next mayor is to make sure that the law enforcement personnel that work for New Yorkers are part of the response and not part of the problem. And I will just say, we've got a mayoral election coming up. And maybe I'll use this as an opportunity to speak about that for a second, if I may. What we have seen over the last several weeks, and really going back to the primary, is a concerted effort by Donald Trump to own the mayor of the city of New York, right? I mean, he did it with Eric Adams, straight up, quid pro quo. You know, Tom Hoylman went on TV and said it, and he annexed the mayor of the largest city in America. And we've now seen him try to do it in this election and fail for the moment. But I think that story is not yet finished. And so what I would just say to everybody about the mayoral election, and I say this as somebody candidly who had some real reservations about Zohran Mamdani in the primary, but I moved to endorse him quickly after the primary election for a host of reasons, but probably none more so than I believe he is a person of integrity, which is not something I think you can say for the balance of the field. And if we want this city to not be a fiefdom of Donald Trump, we have to make sure that he wins the mayoral election in November.
So I think we're going to go Alex and then Mimi and then Tony, and then we'll go back over to that side. Alex is back there in the blue shirt standing up. No, you have to use the mic. Okay, first of all, I want to thank everybody again for keeping your questions brief, because I personally feel that Micah is expressing the anger that we all feel in a way that is extremely sophisticated and super welcome. So I want to give Micah a chance to answer real questions, so please keep up the good work.
I'm going to try to make this a real question, okay? I applaud your efforts in changing legislation, and that's very important. And the thing is, as you said, it may take years for that legislation to be effective. It may not even be effective for 2028, okay? And I was IT support, and I know. I was IT support for research pharmacy at Columbia University for almost 4 years. And we had state authority and federal authority, but state authority came first. And so what we want to do, since state authority will be the Trump administration is making the states responsible. So take advantage of that, okay? Our pharmacy had to follow 2 sets of laws. So if the federal government is taking themselves out of the picture, the state will have to take over. So your legislation sounds like a good idea, but look into the possible unintended consequences, and that's what you need to look for. We've seen that with our zoning in the last few years, and we've seen it with a lot of other things, unintended consequences. You think you're doing the thing for the right reasons, but the opposition has been way ahead of you and turned it around. So that's something to look into. But waiting for the legislation to kick into place, we need to do things now. Don't buy those tariffed products. You're making them make that money. Right. But my question is, what can you do to make us start doing those things now that we need to do to make it possible for them not to be winning in the meantime? Thank you.
Thank you. Look, I've said sort of from the beginning, we need a strategy in the streets, we need a strategy in the courts, we need a strategy in the legislature, and we need a strategy at the voting booths. We need it all. And, my day job is as a legislator, so that's obviously where I'm focused. But this is a great group of activists, and you've been in the streets, and we need to keep that up. I'd ask for your support and help with the legislature, because the reality, somebody asked about New York for All before. I'll tell you the truth. The reason New York for All hasn't passed as much as anything is there are a lot of legislators who are not supportive of it. Like, that's where we're at. They don't come from Manhattan. And, I recognize that this room may not be the right, but if you've got an activist friend or relative who lives in Long Island or the Hudson Valley or Western New York, we need to activate them. And then the ballot box. And again, that's largely about primaries, but we're having a very competitive general election for mayor coming up, and we need all of that energy. And by the way, and your point about not buying tariff products, I'll put another plug for a bill, by the way. I put in a bill that would require car dealers to put on the sticker when they sell a car the price impact of tariffs. But I don't have a monopoly on good ideas, Alex. Let's figure out a boycott strategy. I'm down. I've tried to come up with as many ideas as I have, but I ain't got no monopoly on them. So, my view on the legislature and what Brad said is let's do everything and make somebody tell us no, and throw as much up against the wall as can stick. And I would say the same for activist actions as well. Maybe.
I have followed your work in the legislature with great pleasure and was so pleased to see so many people here Sunday supporting your announcement running.
Thank you.
I am Jewish, you are Jewish, and you know what my next question is going to be. There is a bill in Congress right now to cease the United States sending arms to Israel to be used in Gaza. What is your stand on that issue?
So it is a good question. It is outside the purview of state legislature, but I'll just speak about that for a second. I'm absolutely horrified by what's going on in Gaza. And as you know, there is no defending this war. There's no defending this war. And just period. And we've got fascists here, and Israel's got their fascists, and that is what is happening there. As you probably know, I have I take my Jewish identity very seriously. I have a long history of speaking about these issues. I traveled to Israel 10 days after the October 7th attacks. I have not spent a lot of time contemplating foreign policy legislation. There are a lot of proposals being batted around. If you know me, you know I'm going to wrestle with this for a little while. And so I'm not going to shoot from the hip on it. I'm going to take some time. I'm going to wrestle with it. And, I think Jerry Nadler has been a model of somebody who has been incredibly thoughtful on these issues, and under fire has said, I'm going to be circumspect. And, when I think about the Iran deal, which was a tough vote for him, he spent a lot of time thinking about that. I think he wrote like a 6,000-word essay when he finally came to his conclusion. And so I am going to take some time and try to be as thoughtful on these issues as I can. But I will tell you, I want to use every tool that I have to bring this war to an end while still holding on to my belief. I may be the last person standing who will believe that Israel can still be a Jewish and democratic state and that Palestinians and Jews can live together in peaceful coexistence someday. And I'm not willing to give up on that just yet. And so I'm going to take some time to think about it.
Thank you. I'm not a lawyer and don't play one on TV. This is a bit down in the weeds, but one of the issues about the conservative capture of the Supreme Court that drives me bananas is, I think, this defeat of Chevron deference.
Yes.
Which means essentially executive branch expertise is irrelevant. Is there anything that can be done at the state level? If so, can you discuss that, please?
It's a very good question. Right. So just to, so there was a case the Supreme Court decided called the Loper-Bright case, which eliminated the long-standing principle known as Chevron deference, which said basically that if a federal law did not spell out certain details, there was deference given to executive agencies to spell out those details. And much of the regulatory architecture of our country is based on Chevron deference, and with the demise of Chevron deference, all kinds of protections for people are at risk at the Supreme Court. Lawyers in the room will have to tell me if I got that basically right. Okay, so the housing discrimination bill that I mentioned actually started with conversations with the Attorney General's office before Trump took office about the very question that Tony asked, which is what can we do at the state level to make up for the loss of Chevron deference, and where are state enforcement efforts that rely on federal regulatory regimes that may now be at risk because of Chevron deference and because of Loper-Bright. And we worked with the Attorney General and sort of had a rather broad exploration of that question, and for better or worse, the list was not very long. An obvious area of concern is environmental law. Obviously, the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, these are fleshed out in extensive federal regulations. However, those regulations and then some are already codified in New York state law. So the disparate impact standard was the number one area that the Attorney General said, here is a body of federal regulation and also jurisprudence that the state relies on for its enforcement efforts that doesn't also exist in state law. But beyond that, to be honest, the list does not, they would not come up with much more of a list than that.
Okay, so you can use this, but you have to give it back.
Okay, great. So if in the 2028 election, at the federal level, if there is a Democratic trifecta, would you support packing the court?
Yes.
So I just want to elaborate on that for a second. For those of you who don't know, it doesn't even have to be called court packing. There's another solution, which is that there are 9 Supreme Court justices now, but there are 13 circuit courts, which is the court right below the Supreme Court. There ought to be 13 justices, and a Democratic president should appoint 4 of them. Shoshana.
Hi. So my question is, I'm a social worker with a nonprofit in New York City, and I work with vulnerable populations, specifically young adults. As someone who's read through all 900 pages of the big bill that has passed, what is the role of New York legislature to protect New Yorkers who will be impacted by cuts to Medicaid, cuts to SNAP and food stamps, and who, as a result, will then be unable to participate in these activities or services that provide them with their needs?
Look, it is the short answer is we need to fill as much of that gap as we possibly can, and I think that will be the animating conversation of much of the next legislative session. I don't have a particular. I couldn't prescribe to you today exactly which programs that we should, how we prioritize that. I expect that the governor, again, this is going to be the defining conversation of the budget negotiations. It's kind of a sprawling topic that, frankly, would exceed my capacity to develop a plan with my limited team in the Assembly office. But I expect that the governor will put out an executive budget that fills some of those gaps, probably not enough, just the way these things go. We in the legislature will want to do more, and we will be having an active conversation about how much we can do and how we pay for it. And I'll put in a plug. I've talked about this bill here before, but I'll just put in a plug. There are a lot of ideas to generate revenue. We will need any number of them. This will not be a one solution sort of thing. But I have a bill called the Mega Corporations Act, which changes the way we calculate the corporate income tax to capture taxes that big mega corporations are avoiding paying by offshoring their profits, by basically playing accounting games to move profits overseas. Nationally, this is costing state governments $19 billion a year. It is costing New York State $800 million a year. My bill would close that loophole and generate $800 million a year for the state of New York that could be used to make up for the cuts being imposed by Donald Trump so he can give tax breaks to the same people that are cheating us of our state tax revenue.
Make it quick.
What are your feelings on withholding taxes from the federal government to fund programs in New York?
I have that bill. That's my bill. That's called the Recourse Act, and what it says now, I'll just level set for you. What that bill says is that if the federal government, in violation of a court order, withholds funds from the state of New York, we can withhold funds from the federal government. That's the bill. And there are two problems with that bill. First of all, it is effectively authorizing state officials, and we've had some debate about who, to commit a federal crime. So there's that. And also, we tend to think of this as, well, we send all this money to Washington, but the reality is the money that actually passes through the hands of the state of New York is pretty limited. It's mostly the withholdings, the federal tax withholdings of state employees, which we estimate is not nothing. We estimate to be about $4 billion a year. If the city could do the same thing, and that would more than double it. So it begins to be real money. But again, the idea of the bill, because of the whole federal crime thing, is that you at least want the predicate that the feds are in violation of a court order, so you're at least kind of in a battle that is in the courts. It is not, I don't think, the right answer to a legally permissible congressional reduction of funds. I think there are other answers to that, but I don't know that my bill is the right answer for that. Does that make sense?
Okay, so with a C, pretty close. Carly, yes, I got it. And the striped shirt right here. And then, Micah, I'm going to let you go home.
I told my sons we could try to watch an episode of Only Murders in the Building.
Okay.
Which we're trying to work through. Yes.
I love that show. What are you doing to protect state climate protections and even take them further at a time when Trump is attacking state level climate protections and rolling back federal protections? And also how do you not let the climate crisis slip through the cracks when there's so many other, urgent things going on, but it's also really time sensitive that we, lower global emissions.
Thank you for the question. It's an incredibly important question. I'll say a few things. A bill that I passed this session that I did not mention but was actually quite also difficult, one of the tactics that effectively Republicans in New York State have used to screw up the deployment of solar and wind energy is to tax those projects to death. The state of New York did a siting reform so you could actually locate the projects. Obviously, Trump is trying to kill them using federal authority, but what Republicans in the state do is to say, oh, you want to build a solar farm in our town, we're going to levy taxes on you that make the whole thing completely uneconomical. And this is obviously an important piece of the climate, of our climate goals. The state had tried twice to solve this problem. Both times had been litigated to a stalemate in the courts. I introduced legislation to create a single unified state methodology for taxing wind and solar projects. It was fought vigorously by the Republicans in the Assembly. If you would like to see me get screamed at for an hour and a half, you can watch the debate on that. I believe the final line was Brian Tague from Schoharie County said it's a garbage bill, but we passed it. So that was one piece. But the reality is we have the CLCPA, which is our big climate law. It was an aspirational law. It set targets, and then it left it up to state agencies to kind of lay out a plan to meet those targets. There was a lot of good work that got put into that, and it has all stalled. The current state agencies have all kind of stopped moving forward. I have spoken out on the need to implement the scoping plan for the CLCPA. I used my time at our environmental budget hearing to cross-examine the Commissioner of Environmental Preservation on that topic. It is currently being litigated, and I think the courts are going to order the state to proceed. And that is, I think, the single most important piece of this. There were 2 bills this year that would have done additional things to deal with our climate and environmental challenges. New York Heat, which would have helped wean us off fossil fuel dependency. I was one of the most vocal advocates for the New York Heat Act in the legislature this year. It faced enormous lobbying opposition, largely based in Western New York, and we passed a piece of it, which was a sort of a mixed, it was better than nothing and not what we should have done. And the other bill, which was the Packaging Recycling Reduction Act, sponsored by Assemblymember Glick, was entirely defeated. I mentioned that my bill on consumer protection was the second most lobbied bill of the session. Deborah Glick's packaging reduction and anti-PFAS bill was the most lobbied bill, and the bad guys won. And we got to go back at it next session and pass it.
All right, let's give it up for Micah, okay? Let's give it up for Micah.
Thank you all.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming.
So I just want to say that Micah's urging us to take to the streets. We will be on the streets on September 20th with the Women's March, details to follow. October 18th with the No Kings March, details to follow. We will be on the streets for Zohran Mamdani at the street fairs. Please keep an eye on your email inboxes. We try to be judicious about it, but we will be letting you know about lots of opportunities to channel Micah's well-articulated anger into positive action, specifically once the congressionals get going. Three Parks does not endorse in primaries for the congressionals, but we will be supporting the Democratic candidates. There will be trips to Long Island. There will be trips upstate, and this is all in the very near future. There is an elevator out that door, but I don't want anybody to leave yet because we have to hear from our state committee woman, our district leaders, and they are going to keep their reports brief. But now that we're all back, and welcome back to all of you from the summer, it's important to get up to date. So without further ado, Lynn Thomas.
You may know this, but yesterday the Board of Elections certified the ballot, and obviously we have Mandami first, and then as a Democrat, and then Republican, and then a person named Irene Estrada, who's conservative, and then Mandami is on the Working Families Party. So that's good in the sense of him being first. The next group were independents. So we have Adams, and then we have Joseph Hernandez, and then Como on the Fight and Deliver, and then Walden, who didn't want to be on the ballot, but he still is, because that's the election law. So in the sense of many times, if the person who is first on whatever ballot tends to get the vote, so that's good for us. You probably know that the general election is based on our gubernatorial performance. So we have proposals too. There are 6. One is the state, and we have 3 housing, and for the city, and then there's one a digital city map, and then one that was going to move the local elections for presidential to the election year of for the presidential, so there would only be one. That was pulled off the ballot, or pulled off, so we aren't going to be voting on that. It was withdrawn, the nonpartisan open primary. So we know it's really pretty certain that Micah will win the primary. And then there will be a special election to fill the assembly seat. And we have someone who has filed to run for the assembly, Eli. Where's Eli? Eli Northrup, filed yesterday or today. And then we will be chosen by the county committee. And I bring that up because all these other things are going to be county committee, which many of you, or probably most of you, are on the county committee. And we will have an organizing meeting on the 29th. And so I hope people will be able to go. It's going to be, it's every 2 years is what's called the organizing meeting. And last year was very exciting, and many of the people were there. 2 years ago, there were about 7, and so it's sort of embarrassing for the 69th when that's the case. But there are so many things going to happen this next year, so that's kind of it can be boring actually, but it might be pretty exciting this year. Let's see, and it will be at you'll get more information about it, but it will be at the United Palace Theater, which is 175th and Broadway. And we will, just 2 ways to get there. There probably will be more. You can go by subway on the A train to 175th, and by bus, the the M5, which is on Riverside Drive, goes directly up there. So you'll hear more about that. There probably are some other alternative ways to get there too. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Now we'll hear from Teresa Cantor, one of our district leaders, and then Dan Cohen.
Hi, everyone. I'm here to recruit poll workers for November the 4th, all right? We are trying to train 8,000 poll workers for the upcoming election because we think it's going to be very, very busy, all right? Now, I'm a lead trainer for the BOE, and we started our poll worker training in August. I'm teaching right over at Grace Methodist, and let me tell you, Alex is also one of my assistants, and we have lots of room, so we need a lot more people to train, okay? There are several people here who are poll workers. Alex is, Rick Churchill, Tony Zach, and his wife took a class today. And your name is again? Eleanor. Okay, so she took one of the basic classes today. Aaron Mendelson is also one, and Annie Forsheimer here, Ellen Flax, and Michael Stearns used to be, right? And did I miss anyone else? What is the pay? Very important. It's $100 for the training class as long as you work November the 4th, as long as you pass the certification test and work on November the 4th, which is paid $250 for every election that you work, all right? So you can sign up online. You can call them at 886-2100 and ask for the poll worker department, or check with me, and I'll see that you get signed up, all right? Any questions? Correct. He's no longer there. Okay. All right, sounds good. All right, so thank you very much.
Welcome back, everybody. Happy fall. This is an unprecedented level of political activity. I don't think I've seen this in quite some time. We have a changing of the guard in Congress. The last time that happened was in 1992. For those of you that were here on primary day, Ted Weiss died. And there was a crazy guy running from the New Alliance Party. And the slogan that day was vote for the dead guy, because we didn't want to run the risk that we'd elect somebody really nutty to that congressional seat. This year, Jerry Nadler is letting us know before he parts his mortal coil that he's not seeking re-election. And my alliance for Micah Lasher should be unambiguous, because I think he will be a phenomenal congressman. I mean, we just saw Tony Zak asking about the Chevron doctrine. Carly was asking about environmental policy, and there were several other questions, and that man did not miss a beat. So that's what we need in Congress. We're going to have a state Senate turnover. We just saw about Hoylman Sigal. We're losing two excellent state legislators, one moving up to the Fed potentially, one moving, well, that side down, but to the state, to the city. But I know that we've seen Eli Northrup has filed. I read that in the paper the other day, that he's filed to run for the Assembly, and that is great to see. I'm sure others may join him, but I applaud you, sir, for throwing your hat in the ring. We need excellent people in the Assembly, and I look forward to hearing more about your candidacy. I'm going to call it there, because I know the night is long, and you've heard from a lot of people speaking. Any quick questions? Yes. Al, this better be a question, man. I'm serious. They're going to eat you alive. Are you going to tell everybody what happened today in the assassination of that Republican? That's a very important thing for everybody to know about. I'm going to defer to my club president. Thank you, everybody. I would yield the floor back to Danielle Girard.
What happened today is a perfect example of those who live by the sword, die by the sword. And with that, we are adjourned. Please, Chuck will lead you out to the elevator if you need the elevator, and the rest of us can take the stairs. Thank you all for coming.